That's an interesting point. We were learning yesterday about you need to have Kiddush b'makom Seudah, so you need to have a kazayas of cake. So we're talking about the crackers, those round crackers. How many of them are a kazayas? So I went home. I had a box of these crackers. So the box is 12.5 ounces. The box, 12.5 ounces. Now, if you look at those, they're called stackers or whatever. So there's 4 packages in them. Each one has 30 crackers. That means there's 120 crackers in 12.5 ounces. So I did the math. So 1 ounce of kazayas is 9.6 crackers. That would be a kazayas that if you're eating crackers, you need to know how many crackers do you need to eat to make an after bracha? It's 9.6 crackers. If you want to eat crackers for Kiddush b'makom Seudah, you need to have about 10 crackers basically, because they're very light, and that's what it is.
Or extra revita wine.
Yeah, well, that's what we're talking about now. We're talking now about the crackers. Thank you. Okay. That is an old machlekes if it's volume or weight. A lot of Avram Chaim no writes weight. Then they say he changed his mind later and said volume. If you look in the law of Chabad, which was edited by the Rebbe, it says mishkal 1 ounce, which is a weight of 1 ounce. I don't know. A lot of the Rabbanim say it's volume, but if you look at the Pashtus, Loshen, Shulchan Aruch, and it's weight. And even in the English Haggadahs that were mugged by the Rebbe at one time, it also says weight. I don't know. It's a big machlekes about... okay, 1 second. 1 second. Now we're learning something else. So you have to do, on Shabbos, you have to have what's called lechem mishnah. Now it's interesting. According to halacha, anytime you wash on Shabbos, you need to have 2 halachos. Or 2 matzahs, whatever. But you need to have lechem mishnah. What happens if a guy decides to wash 5 times on Shabbos? Whatever. Every time you wash, you need to have lechem mishnah. You need to have 2 halachos or 2 matzahs. Why? Because the one fell double on Friday and didn't fall on Shabbos. So, by the way, this din applies. The Alter Rebbe says clearly it applies to men and women. Some poskim say it doesn't apply. Meaning Yisrael that it doesn't apply to women. But the bottom line is, women, if they're washing on Shabbos, they need to have lechem mishnah. A lot of times you see by a kiddush, the men go wash, and they put the 2 halachos next to each other, and the women just make hamotzi. So really, they need lechem mishnah. The lechem mishnah doesn't mean that you have your own lechem mishnah. If somebody is, let's say, making the head of the household is making hamotzi, right, and he has lechem mishnah, so then the women don't need their own lechem mishnah. If they hear the hamotzi, of the person making the bracha, and they answer amen, so then they are yaitza, they fulfill their obligation of having 2 halachos. Now that obligation could be done even before they wash. What happens, the man makes kiddush and he goes to wash and the woman got busy with the baby, whatever, even though she didn't wash yet. As long as she hears the man make hamotzi over 2 halachos, she fulfills her obligation of lechem mishnah. But if she doesn't hear the bracha, let's say, then when she makes a hamotzi, she needs to have 2 halachos or 2 matzahs.
The other men in the room
Also, they're all fulfill their obligation.
Okay.
No, not. I'm saying, but usually it's like, yeah, you're right. If there's 10 men at the table, only one has lechem mishnah. Yeah, what?
The other people at the table, they will need to make a hamotzi again. Say the bracha.
If one person is making a hamotzi for everybody, okay. So there's different customs in halacha even. In many poskim in halacha, they write that when you get wine, you do make a bracha, and when you get the hamotzi, you don't make your own bracha. But the Rebbe writes clearly that our meaning is the opposite. That our meaning is when you get wine from Kiddush, unless if you talked. But if you get wine from Kiddush, then you don't make a brei pri hagafa when you drink the wine. By challah, by lechem mishnah, when you get your own piece of challah, the guy cuts, let's say, and everybody gets, then you do make your own hamotzi. No, but the minig is, officially it means that you're making your own bracha. That's the intention, was that you're making your own bracha. In a lot of poskim says the opposite. Wine, you do make a bracha on Hamotzi not. What? Yeah, you could do one challah, one matzah. Now Now there's an interesting question. You have, in New York, they used to have what's called section, they still do, section challahs. Or here in LA, they have pull-aparts. Okay, so it's one big challah, right? And then it's pull-aparts. You pull them apart separately. So now the question is, if you pull them apart, can they be counted as lechem mishnah? Because the truth is, they're baked as one. They're sold as one. But they're made to pull apart. That's why they're called pull-aparts. So the question is that counted as lechem mishnah? Is it considered as two separate challahs, or is it considered one challah? Same thing with the section challah, or whatever. So the section is just a rectangular pull-apart. It's the same thing. So the question is that counted as lechem mishnah? So there's a machlekes in poskim. Some poskim say, yeah, you could count it as separate challahs. Some poskim say, no, you don't. So the bottom line is, if that's what you need, that's if there's nothing else, then you could definitely use that separate parts, the pull-aparts, you can use them as lechem mishnah. Now what happens, one more thing, one second. What happens if you end up not having two challahs? I'll give you an example. You had a meal, you had two challahs, right? And then somebody pops in the middle of the meal, and there's no more complete challahs. And there's no matzah, and there's no complete challahs. So what do? So there's a story with the previous Rebbe. Somebody once came to, they were in the middle of the meal. Somebody came in the middle of the meal, they didn't make Kiddush yet, so he told him to make Kiddush. Then he didn't lechem mishnah, it was Yom Tov. So the Friedrich Rebbe took what says in halacha, by the way. Then if you don't have two whole challahs, what do? You take two pieces of challah. Okay, it's not really the best lechem mishnah, but for the situation, you take two separate pieces of, even pieces of challah, and you put them together and you make a mezi. And the Friedrich Rebbe, when he gave it to him, he said him in Yiddish, which is translated in Yiddish, it's much richer because it's the way the words flow. But basically, the previous Rebbe told him there's no person as complete as a broken one. A broken-hearted person. There's nothing as more complete than a broken-hearted person. So he gave him the two broken challahs. He said there's nothing more complete than broken ones. It's an interesting concept in Avodas Hashem. What do you want? Okay.
For the break apart, and you want to use one of those break aparts, do you have to separate it before making the bracha, or is it okay to do what's whole?
So there's, in the Meishiv, what's the Sheila Meishiv, there's, the question is, when you have, let's say, the section challah, do you have to break them apart to use separate, or while they're still stuck together, can you? So there is an opinion that holds, but it's a minority opinion. The Sheila Meishiv brings down that you can use them even if they're put together, but the meaning is that you don't, you actually separate them. What? He didn't hear the bracha. Did he hear the Hamotzi? So he has to do lechem mishnah himself. What?
If you have sliced bread, and you don't have one lechem mishnah, can you use the slice, like the whole loaf? I mean,
you have no choice. It's like taking a broken piece. That's why, in the bakery, when you go, they slice the challah for you. For lechem mishnah, it's a problem. Because you need the whole challah. What?
Second question is, if you're not planning on eating the second bread, do you have to take it out of the plastic bag? One, or two, what if you get it out of the freezer? Could it be frozen in a regular one that you're going to eat?
So they bring out, one second, it's all discussed in Shuvas, in Poskim. So it says that preferably should be taken out of the plastic bag. It should preferably be taken out of the plastic bag. But they write that you could use a frozen challah as the second challah. Because it's still a whole challah. There's still a whole challah, so what?
So this might be manish, but when you say a whole challah, if you have a sliced challah, you haven't taken any of the slices away.
No, but it's not sliced. No, it's not. No, it's not a whole challah. It's a cut up challah.
But it's still whole.
It's not whole. Not whole.
If you ate the whole thing, you know you ate a whole challah.
Let me tell you something. If somebody went over to a woman,
Yeah.
okay, to give you a clear-cut example of this, he says,
Recording on.
it's fine. A guy comes over to a woman and he says to her, "Arei mekudeshes li
Yeah.
b'tabazu," on the condition that this challah is complete. And the condition the challah is whole. Okay? Would the kedushin be valid or not? Sliced. A guy comes over to a woman and he says, he takes a sliced challah. Okay? The Gemara says this a lot of times, this is my nafkamina la halacha. This is a nafka difference in halacha. It could be a question of eish yasish or not. Okay? So a guy comes over to a woman and says, he gives her a ring, whatever, but on the condition, if you know, today you don't make condition, but years ago they used to make conditions. On the condition that this challah is complete. So it wouldn't be a valid kedushin at all, because the challah is not complete. It's not a complete. Now the question in halacha is, what?
Does it have to be challah, but if it's flat bread, for instance?
It could be bagel, it could be pita. Yeah, but pita a lot of times is cut. So it's about pita. Okay, so once
Pita is never cut.
okay, well, you cut off. Okay, you're right. Okay, but let me explain to you something. This applies more by a matzah than it does by. Okay, let's say you have a matzah, okay, but it's cracked. The Pesach, right? It's cracked. There's a crack down the middle here, not all the way. It's cracked part way. So is it whole or not? So the din is, if you hold it up like this, and it doesn't, then it's considered whole. If it falls apart, if it breaks, then it's not whole. Now, how much of a challah is allowed to be missing that it's still considered whole?
One thing.
Sorry. So in halacha it says, they're going to say 1/48. If 1/48 of the challah or less is missing, then it's fine. So sometimes you have a new challah, especially if you take it out of the freezer, sometimes it's more, a little piece of the top, breaks off a little bit. So halacha says, many poskim so I don't know, it's a question of Alter Rebbe holds like that or not, because Alter Rebbe said it has to be mamish complete. But if it's missing up to 48th, the poskim right is considered complete.
How'd they come up with that number?
It has to do with the amount of challah. What?
So a lot of times when you're baking challah on a tray, and then they get bigger and they connect together, and then you separate them.
No, those are considered separate, by the way.
Really?
Because they're made. By the way, I don't know if you ever saw this. You ever go, now forget the hand shmura matzah. If you ever go to the big machine matzah companies, okay, the matzah doesn't come out the square that you get in the box. It comes in a big sheet of matzah, and then they cut it with a machine. Huh?
Before they bake it.
No, after that. I believe it's after they bake it.
Gotta be before, because the edges are brown.
Okay, so maybe they do it before, but it's a big sheet, and then they cut it up. But over there, it's considered separate, and that's the whole shaila if the section challah could be considered, or the pull apart. Is it sold as one unit, or sold as separate units? Each matzah is sold separate. You buy a box of matzah, but the matzah is a separate thing. Yeah. A pull apart is sold as one challah. So over there you have an argument, is it good, is it not good? But a matzah for sure is, a hand shmur matzah is mamish made separately. But a lot of times you have a problem in Pesach, you're trying to find complete matzahs. The hand shmur matzah, and a lot of times they're chipped. Yeah. So what some people do, and an interesting thing, if it's chipped, okay, so they'll do, you can't do this in Shabbos. They'll take a match, and where it's chipped, they'll burn it, and then it gets the brown edge. No, that's what it says you could do. And then it becomes like, now you just bake the matzah, it became whole again, because now it has a brown edge. Nothing, halachically now, it's considered full.